What we're going to be talking about today is applied game theory. Now, applied game theory is based on game theory, or what I call mathematical or classical game theory, which was developed by John von Neumann, one of the most important logicians, philosophers, and mathematicians and computer scientist pioneers of the 20th century. Most of von Neumann's students actually worked at the Manhattan Project and invented the atom bomb. Richard Feynman and many others. John Nash and a fellow named Harvey Slayton, who was the person that I studied with. And one of the things that von Neumann did is she realized that if you look at life in general, what you can see is that it can be framed like a game. And when I mean a game, I'm being very specific in a child's type of way. Every game has players, a space where the game is played. It may be a field or a board. In addition to that, there are referees and rules of engagement, punishments for breaking the rules. So people will play games like poker or chess or checkers, or even little kids in a sandbox, but they never really think about the idea that their entire life can be framed as if it's a game. So originally, von Neumann developed the idea of game theory, and originally it was designed around the idea that in most games there are winners and there are losers. Of course, in the work that's come since those 1940s and the 1930s and the original idea was developed, what we now know is that there are games where everybody can win. And there are also games where more people can win in some ways and other people win in other ways. But the things that defined originally in mathematical game theory was that most likely the person you're competing with or dealing with is a rational agent. And that word agent is a term that's generally used to address a player in a game. And so every agent, every player, or we'll use the term agent for this conversation, has a benefit that they see in playing the game, an end result. And that is called a utility. And I want to use a little bit of technical language here, not very complex, but we are talking about game theory, and these are the terms that would be used by game theorists. Things like utility and other terms like that. So the original type of game was called a zero-sum game, where, and let me explain to you what a zero-sum game is, because it's the most basic concept in game theory. And not applied game theory, but actually in game theory. So let's say you have 50 people at a party, and somebody brings out a pie, and there are 10 slices in this pie. And it's a little bit of a chaotic party, and they're not very polite, these people. And the person that bakes the cake has a little bit of a trickster in them, and they like to see people fighting over pie. So they come out and they say, each person gets one slice of pie. But remember, there's only 10 slices of pie and 40 people at the party, which means that when those 10 slices of pie are gone, there is no pie left. 10 people get pie, 30 people don't. And the rule is that nobody is allowed to share their pie with anybody else. That is called a zero-sum game, or a win-lose game. In a non-zero-sum game, or a win-win game, theoretically, if everybody wants everybody else to get some pie, even though the pie has 10 slices, some people would take fewer or pie, or they wouldn't have any, or they take a smaller pie, and everybody would get a little piece of that pie. And that's a win-win game, or a non-zero-sum game. So game theory framed everything in that particular way. So here's the thing that you need to remember. In classical game theory, the assumption is that all the players in that game are rational players. They're rational human beings. They have common sense. They're logical. They think rationally. Now, that is both the strength of game theory and also its greatest flaw. because one of the easiest ways to determine a strategy is what's called the Nash Equilibrium. And if you saw the movie A Beautiful Mind about John Nash, Nash is the one who developed the idea of a Nash Equilibrium. What Nash is saying is, if you can tell me what the space is, how many players there are, what are the resources, all of the important variables, and what you would need to know to create an effective strategy in that game, then a really skilled player could develop a really supreme strategy that was so good that they would never change that strategy no matter what anybody else did or any of their opponents did. It wouldn't matter. If they can maximize their potential, it wouldn't matter what their opponents did. That's a Nash equilibrium, and that's based on the idea that all the people are rational. But what we know is that most people are not rational. What they do is they behave emotionally and irrationally, but they present their irrationality in a rational sort of way so that all the people they have to deal with don't think they're crazy. So applied game theory, or Harrison's applied game theory, my approach to applied game theory that I developed for my own life and my students, says that you can never assume that someone that you are engaging in a competitive environment is rational. And not only can you not assume that, but you have to develop skills to see how they are likely to behave in their irrationality. So a person who does classical game theory would be totally surprised by Donald Trump. It doesn't make any sense to them why he does the things he does. It's irrational. But somebody who understands applied game theory could see what he does and why he does it and what he's likely to do, because he frames his irrationality in ways that seem rational to the people he's speaking to, who most of the time are also irrational. So in applied game theory, you are taking a scenario and you're saying to yourself, knowing all the variables, knowing all the players, knowing all the rules, knowing the game space, knowing my own personal strengths and weaknesses, what is it that I would need to do to maximize my potential in a particular situation at the lowest possible cost? And that's the essence of what applied game theory is. You're saying, how can I be more effective? How can I be more efficient, precise, productive, and even self-aware in such a way so that no matter what my opponents or adversaries are doing, I can still maximize my potential in that situation. So that is the essence of it. The only place that applied game theory does not work well is in the arts, in the practice of religion, and in understanding of culture, and in dealing with issues like art or philosophy. But when dealing with the general world of commerce and human behavior, game theory, and applied game theory in particular, is probably the most effective system you could ever use to maximize your potential at the lowest possible cost. That's it.